Well, we've come to the end of this chapter dealing with diversity. So today we're going to take a look at how this chapter deals with some of the other dimensions of diversity, such as culture, and how culture has really influenced not only businesses here but overseas. And we're also going to take a look at sponsorship and other ways that we can help other people groups come and assimilate into our businesses. So let's go ahead and get started with this final video on diversity. Okay, class, let's go ahead and finish up chapter 11. Today we're going to be looking at more of a cultural perspective on diversity. So let's go ahead and begin. Global diversity in socio-cultural environment. Globalization has caused managers to confront a broader range of issues, and social and cultural differences can cause conflict. Now, we really didn't emphasize globalization very much until maybe a decade or so ago when you competed with companies. It was really restrained to our geographic region. You had the United States. Now, there were imports and exports, and we did do business with people overseas, but technology has really condensed the globe, especially the market. So now we're having to deal with people overseas. If we're going to be able to really sustain businesses and grow them, we're going to have to go overseas, and that can cause problems because not every culture is going to be the same. Here, even though we may not practice it, we espouse ethics, and we would look at maybe under the table bribes, extortion, unethical influences, such as doing business with people who will threaten you if you don't do business with them. All of these things are foreign to us. But when you go to Russia, if you don't do business with the mafia, you can wind up in trouble. KFC found that out when they first tore down the Berlin Wall. We went in and we went in to develop the country as far as bringing industry into it and retailing into it. And the Russian mafia wanted to supply KFC with their own chickens. And KFC said, no, we have to maintain our standards, and you don't live up to those standards. So eventually they had to put a gate and a fence around the place and guard it because of the threats from their mafia. Some governments want kickbacks. I know in Central America, to get anything done, you've got to bribe the officials there. So some places are really to the point where unethical behaviors and things that we would consider to be illegal here are the norm over there in throughout the globe. So there can be conflict from all of that. You're trying to uphold standards, and they don't have the same standards. So global diversity, it's not just something that is a pie-in-the-sky type of idea, because you do have difficulties with it. Now, there are some more differences that we experience when we look at going overseas to do business. Now, I'm going to let you look at Exhibit 11.5 pretty much on your own. You have this PowerPoint, so you can take a look at the difference between, let's say, power distance in America as opposed to maybe India, which is number 2 on the scale. And just look at those differences, and I'll explain what power and uncertainty and all of that is all about here in the next slide. First of all, power distance. Power distance is how much people accept equality in power. High power distance reflects an acceptance of power inequality among institutions, organizations, and individuals. Low power distance means people expect equality in power. So let's say, for instance, you're in an organization, and that organization is comprised of the CEO up here, and then you have VPs here, and then you have managers here, supervisors here, and then the worker there. There's distances between these levels of authority all the way to the top, and people accept that. For instance, the worker would not go right to the CEO to solve problems. That would be inappropriate and unacceptable. So in organizations that are stratified, that means there's different levels of authority in an organization. There's going to be power distance, and we have that. Now, low power distance would probably look something like this. The worker and managers and all that have a mutual understanding. They talk to each other. There's no real segregated or high division of power. Everyone expects equality in power. Uncertainty avoidance. That's the degree to which members of a society feel uncomfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity and support beliefs and behaviors that promise certainty and conformity. For instance, in Japan, they're more of a traditionalist type of society, so they may not be as open to innovation as perhaps we would be. And there are some cultures that are ingrained in this is the way we've always done it. I'm sure you've been in churches that have had that same attitude. This is the way we've always done it, and we're not about to change. So dealing with people, as you try to expand, as you try to innovate and create, know that some cultures are risk aversive. They don't like uncertainty. They want to stick with what is certain and what is comfortable to them. And those are the things that they know. Now, individualism. Individualism places, as the name implies, places emphasis on the individual, the person. For instance, in American industry, you have Employee of the Month or Employee Parking. So you're not really emphasizing anything that would be a group endeavor. You're looking at the individuals and their independent contributions to the company. Collectivism is different. You're a part of a collective whole, and your job is to support that collective or that group. Japan, for instance, is a collectivist society. We, on the other hand, are individualistic. And many of the great theories and business and management models were rejected by us because of our individualistic values, but yet they were embraced by the Japanese, and because they had a collectivist attitude and mentality, they were able to make many models like TQM, Thrive, empowerment. They were able to master the concepts of empowerment and so forth. And this is why, arguably, companies like Toyota are head and shoulders above American manufacturing, especially at least in automobiles, because it's not the equipment or the material, that's all the same, but it's the way that they view the worker and how workers should interact to support the organization. Masculinity, and that's the preference for achievement and assertiveness, material success, and so forth. So here it's about the bottom line. Let's go and let's meet the objectives. Let's work. Let's be successful. Let's achieve. Let's move up the ladder. That's a masculine type of value. Femininity is devoted to quality of life, cooperation, relationships. So, for instance, America, we want to get the job done. We reward success and achievement and assertiveness. That's just part of the American psyche. But in places like Central America, places like Mexico, or even in the Mediterranean, they emphasize family. So you may have an American worker with a masculine attitude work 12 hours a day, 5 days, 7 days a week, where in places like Greece, they may work 3 or 4 hours a day and then spend the rest of the day with their family. So it's just a matter of different values that each society has. Now, cultural intelligence is another one of those fairly new words, just like having emotional intelligence. Cultural intelligence is the ability to use reasoning and observation to interpret unfamiliar situations and devise appropriate behavioral responses. For instance, if you go to Japan and someone hands you a business card, the tradition is that you cup your hand. You use both hands, put it in front of the person, and they will lay the card in your hand. Now, you don't just grab it and put it in your pocket. That's disrespectful. You make sure that they have passed or that the meeting is over with, and then you can put the business card away. I guess something with a person's name on it, they reverence out of respect, so they would expect you to behave the same way. And there's other things too, just body language. If you make the OK symbol here in the United States, that's a sign of, hey, I agree with you, or that's good, or you approve. In some cultures, you could get slapped for that because it's an obscene gesture. So you have to be aware of your surroundings and be able to devise ways of responding to it. Now, components of cultural intelligence, when you're responding to it, you need to understand there's the cognitive, emotional, and the physical dimension. Cognitive is observational and learning skills and the ability to pick up on clues to understanding. For instance, you can watch people in how they, let's say in Japan, receive business cards. You may pick up on that. Emotional is having self-confidence and self-motivation. The leader has to believe in his or her ability to understand and assimilate into different cultures. So it's your amount of confidence that will help you in these different cultures. And physical intelligence, cultural intelligence, is the ability to shift speech patterns, expressions, body language to be in tune with people from a different culture. We have a tendency here to speak very quickly because time is important, time is money. But you may have to slow down your speech if you're talking to someone in Indonesia or Thailand or maybe Mexico or so forth. So just knowing the different dimensions can help you out tremendously when you are assimilating yourself into a foreign culture. Now, are leaders expected to be experts? And then the question is it important for managers to have at hand precise answers to most questions their subordinates may raise about their work? In Japan, they expect that. Spain, they would expect that. Sweden, they don't care. It may not be a big issue with us. United States, we're ranked number 18, so we're not even at the midpoint yet. But you can see here that many people overseas expect managers to be able to answer questions at hand about their work, where oftentimes here in America, I can talk to people who work within their company, have been there several years. What do you do? They can describe their job, but they really don't understand what the company does. They don't really understand where they fit within that corporate structure and so forth. So you can tell that we don't have much of an importance placed on having all the answers or many answers to the questions that may be raised at work. Now here's the stages of personal diversity awareness. I'll let you guys take a look at that. You usually go from defense all the way up to integration. And when you are maybe meeting someone at first, you may not be comfortable with that person. For instance, you get a Muslim in the workplace, and you may feel uncomfortable with that person. And in the secular world, get ready, because you're probably going to have to deal with people of different faiths and belief systems and all of that. And then you minimize differences. You start to trivialize maybe cultural differences and so forth. We can never compromise our religious stand, but in this case, you may trivialize some of the cultural differences, such as their need to be able to pray 5 times, or their desire to eat. I've seen many Muslims eat with their fingers. They don't use silverware. So just trivializing some of the differences there. Acceptance, realizing that they're different, and then recognize the validity of their ways. Even though they may be different, you adapt, and that's shifting from one cultural perspective to another, and then integrate. And that's having a multicultural attitude, which enables one to look and use and come together culturally, and to be able to get the job done. Now, employee affinity groups. These groups are based on social identity, and it concerns the employees from specific groups and enables them to make greater contributions to the organization. And we'll take a look at these here in the next slide. Sometimes they're called diversity networks or employee resource groups. They pursue activity that creates ties to others throughout the organization. It helps employees to be more effective, and it helps to reduce social isolation. And the ones who are in a part of it include senior leaders, and it contributes to organizational effectiveness. It's kind of like a sponsor. When you go to a company, they may have someone or groups that you can go to, and that sponsor will show you around, and that group will be kind of your support network as you get more, as you go into the group. But now there is sponsorship, solely sponsorship, and we're going to look at that here in the next slide. But diversity networks, these are people of different races and cultures and so forth that come together and help each other out to help better assimilate into an organization. Now, the last thing we're going to look at is sponsorship, and that's strong support from a powerfully positioned executive who is willing to put his or her reputation on the line to promote an individual's career advancement. And essentially what you're doing as the leader, you're looking for people who have talent, who you want to bring up into the organization. So you are giving everything over, your time, your efforts, expertise, and so forth, to position that person and sponsor that person in that position. And you do take risk, because if they fail, it's on you. It's not on anybody else. But there are people who will sponsor individuals, put them in a place where they can move up quickly or have better promotion opportunities, and give them those opportunities. And then minority sponsorship, it is a sponsor who advocates on behalf of the protege and connects the individual to important people and assignments. So really what you're looking at here is the same thing as regular sponsorship. You are just looking at minorities as that target to be that protege. Now, that's given us a pretty good overview of diversity for this week. So I pray that as you move on in your careers, that you'll understand that today we're a melting pot. Whether you agree with people or their values or their religion or whatever, or their sexual preference, today that's big. We do have to realize that as individuals in a secular organization, we do have to give a Christ-like demeanor. We have to love. And there's not only that spiritual mandate, but there's also the legal mandate. So having known that, I hope that each of you do well when you go out to your businesses, and appreciate better how diversity can help you in your organization. Well, today we saw how culture has an impact on diversity and the business place. You know, this isn't something new. The Bible talks about diversity. You know, in the Bible, we had even some of our heroes of the faith struggle with different people groups. If you remember, Peter struggled with his loyalty as a Jew and still trying to minister to Gentiles. And that was a big issue back then. So diversity is something that we all have had to confront, and we have to deal with it. But we should take the attitude of Paul that all of us are equal in God's sight, and that once we have been saved, that's even better because we're all a part of the same family of God. There's neither Jew nor Gentile. But we need to remember that also in the workplace. Now, they may not all be saved, but we should not, as Christians, discriminate against anybody. Now, again, there are some spiritual and religious considerations that we have to uphold, and I know that as Christian leaders you will do so. But when it comes to treating people fairly, with respect and honesty, that too is expected, and I know you'll do well in that too. Have a good day, and we will continue on next week with Chapter 12.